So yes, this is the 5th Giffgaff happenings. This is Rich Martell. He's an app developer, an entrepreneur, a man who's already doing far better than I am at his much younger age. I'm Ian Morris. I'm a tech journalist. I write about this kind of stuff on a daily basis for people like Forbes and Digital Spy. And so what we're going to do tonight, we're going to have a question and answer session. We're going to get to know Rich, find out what the tips are for success. At the end of that, we'll have time for everyone to ask questions if you've got them. There's going to be a little exercise. Rich knows what it is. Yeah. It'll be, you'll be wireframing an app kind of thing. And then we'll come round and we'll see what you're doing, and Rich will give you some tips. So anyway, let's get on. We should start at the beginning, really. Yeah. But you did start, running a business quite young. So tell us where you're from first.
Yeah, so I'm from, I originally grew up just north of London. It's a little village called Shillington, and my parents have lived there I've lived there all my life. That's where they kind of settled after they got married, and then I went to school in a town called Bedford, and kind of just had a fairly sort of normal upbringing, nothing too out of the ordinary. But I always I was kind of, as many people were, kind of forced into getting a job. Like after school, I got home and normally had homework and I was tired. So I didn't really want to go to work, but my mum was quite adamant that I had to have a job, like when I was kind of 14, 15. And so I went and eventually worked down the village pub. And I think our village had about 3 pubs, and I went and worked at this one. And I wanted to work in the bar because that's the fun bit, it's more social. I ended up like pot washing at the back.
Too young for bar work. That's
that's the problem. And I think they pay you less in the kitchen as well. So, but it was one of the most horrendous experiences of my life. Like, I don't know if any of you have worked in a bar or like in a kitchen. I found it really, really like boring, and it's a really hard way to make make some money.
You get shouted at a lot in kitchens.
You do. I had a really nasty boss, and actually that was one of the first times I was kind of like, I cannot go through my life having a boss and the other side of it, if I ever had employees, I would not treat them the way that she treated us. So yeah, I did that, but then eventually I grew a bit tired of this, so I wanted to figure out a way that I could not do that anymore, but still kind of impress upon my mum that I was at least doing something towards that was furthering myself. And so a friend of mine at school, actually it wasn't really a friend, it was a guy at school. I saw he was in the computer room building his own website, and so I thought it'd be really cool to do the same. And so I learned how to build a very, very basic website. And I went home. My mum quite liked the idea of this, so she actually introduced me to a couple of her friends who needed websites, and I eventually started flogging websites. The first couple I did for a couple of £100, and then it kind of grew from there. So that was probably that was when I was about 10 years ago. So it was when I was about 15. Yeah.
So because that was boom. That's a good way of getting into that, because that's a lot of people I know.
The only problem is I used to get dropped off by my mum because outside of London there wasn't any public transport. I used to go to client meetings and get dropped off by my mum, and my mum used to wait outside in the car. And that's not the best first impression, is when you get dropped. Actually, sometimes it is, because they make you think like you're a chauffeur.
Yeah. Alan Sugar. It's
it's very Alan Sugar, except for it wasn't quite a Rolls Royce. That's the only thing. It wasn't quite, and especially I was getting out the front, and she just waited around the corner. So.
Absolutely. So you did the websites to start with. I mean, what did you? That progressed obviously, and so I mean, what are we talking about in terms of your first year of doing that? What were you making in that time?
Well, I think it built up. Like the first, to be honest, and I was. Working on very, very small projects, but eventually more and more people came to me, and it was all about kind of building a bit of word of mouth. So when you have absolutely nothing, and you have nothing to show people what you're doing, you kind of have to do something very cheaply. So the first couple I did for a few £100s, but I think by the end of the first year we were building a website. I think the most I did for a website in the first year was about £2,000, which at school was really good. Yeah. But what I was very efficient at doing them really, really quickly. And then kind of getting people on maintenance contracts as well. So we basically paid to maintain it. So I think in the first year, or maybe just over the 18 months, it was probably about just over 50 grand.
Do you still have any of those clients, by the way?
Actually, it's funny, a few guys still come to me and email me. It's like, can you update the website? And I'm like, I can, but then I'll get one of the guys to do it. Because
are you still charging them maintenance?
Yes.
That's brilliant.
But some of them were paying them. Yeah, some of them were paying £50 a year or something like that.
You want to get on that?
Yeah, exactly. We need to bump their prices up.
So, I mean, so what is it you think about you that made you interested in being an entrepreneur? I mean, do your parents do stuff like that? I mean, was that where it came from, or were you a one-off kind of?
No, both my parents have been. I mean, my dad's been an entrepreneur, businessman since his late 20s. So he's had all sorts of business, from importing wine, exporting newspapers. He invented one of the first sat navs in the world. So I was kind of brought up with that. My mum has a fish and chip shop franchise. So it's kind of like, I was kind of sort of grown up, and I always wanted to go into business and do something like that. But my parents were very much like, go and get a job, go and do that first, and then see how you get on.
Do you think that matters? Do you think you need to have that to be an entrepreneur, or do you think there's something more to it than that?
I think it varies. I mean, I think timing is everything in life, and I think that it really depends on what you are. Sometimes it's much better to go, and I'd recommend this to anyone, if you're thinking about going and starting a business, it might actually be better going and getting a job at a startup or in an industry before you actually go and do that. I've actually got a couple of friends who knew they wanted to start a business. A friend of mine actually, who's now just started a property website that does lettings. To understand the property market, he actually went and worked at Foxtons for, I think, three or 4 months.
That's quite a sacrifice.
Yeah, so he was working in a pretty well-paid marketing job, went and worked at Foxtons purely to understand how Foxtons worked, and now he's trying to put Foxtons out of business.
That's crazy.
So I think it is, like, work is really useful, especially when you are learning, and you can like speed up the whole process of all the mistakes other people have made and just get them done then.
When did you realise that, I mean, presumably technology has always been massively important to you. I mean, you grew up in a quite a fortunate time, there were computers everywhere. Yeah. But when did you realise that technology was going to be a huge part of your life?
Well, as you say, I think I grew up in a really like interesting time where it was, we had, I mean, this was kind of pre-Facebook. Facebook had just kind of started, but it was only the US. Twitter was not big over here, and I think it was, the thing that really I loved was actually the first thing I can really remember getting involved with is Napster. So Napster, if you don't know, I haven't heard of Napster, was a peer-to-peer music sharing site. A lot of people don't know what it is.
That's crazy.
But I love Napster.
Yeah.
It was like the power of the people and the fact that you could share this files on your computer and kind of do all that. So I enjoyed kind of looking at that kind of technology and looking at building websites, building things that got people engaged, and it was just fun, like building things that kind of saved you time as well. So I built like scripts that kind of did maths equations for me that helped me do my homework, and I just thought the power of computing was really cool.
Now, you had at school, you had some problems, didn't you?
That's one way to
your
put it,
start in tech is controversial,
yeah.
And then so is most of your career in tech. But what was it you did at school that got you into hot water?
So my school was very, very backwards with computing. Like we had this computer room. It didn't have many very good computers, but the whole school admin, they were kind of learning themselves, and back then schools didn't employ the best computer technicians and things like that. And so,
if at all.
No, if at all. Yeah, actually my school did have one, he was just not very good. And I'd figured out a way that I could get into the school database. And the school was starting to put a load of data on there, so they used to put all the contact details of all the staff, all the boys. They used to put grades on there. I found out who was going to be head boy before he did, and before it was announced. And one of my friends came to me and said he had a crush on one of the teachers, and I said, I could get your number if you want. And so I gave him the teacher's number and said, look, whatever you do with it, I don't want to know. Just don't tell anyone you got it from me. About a week later, I got a call from the headmaster saying I'd come into his office and he suspended me. So
I'm fascinated about what happened in that phone call, though.
Yeah, well, my parents were away at the time, and so and my grandma was looking after me. And I came home. My grandma offered me some port. So that was the first time that my grandma's ever tried to get me drunk.
Good start.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
From there, you obviously you obviously proved that you were good at it. I mean, how did your parents react to that? Did they find it kind of sort of encouraging that you were at least good at what
they
you were
weren't
doing?
very impressed, to be honest, because it meant that I was at home for 2 weeks, which I thought was
a long
great.
Suspension,
yeah,
right?
No, it was quite good fun though, because you basically that's not encouraging it, but I got to work on a lot of cool stuff, because it was kind of like it wasn't a holiday, so I didn't have any other friends to hang out with, but I could just play around, I could build stuff, and it was quite useful. But I also had they gave me detention work to do as well, which which wasn't so fun. But they weren't that impressed, but I think they also found the funny side of it as well.
Presumably they now do.
Yeah.
Because you've proved that there's a spirit there.
I think it's the kind of thing that you've got to... I had to be squeaky clean for the rest of my school career after that, until I got to uni.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that now. So, I mean, where did you go to university first of all?
So, I think one of the only options for me when I left school was to go and study computer science, because that was pretty much the only thing that interests me. So I actually went to UCL, which is just down the road in central London. So it was, I did a 3-year course there, and it's doing computer science is quite interesting because they teach you a lot of like theoretical stuff. And the one thing I didn't really like about the course, it wasn't very practical. So it was all about these models, and it was very mathematical. And I really wanted to just build stuff, like build interesting websites and just get out there. But that's not really what the course was about. And so I actually got a bit brainwashed by a lot of these big companies that came in. And I don't know if any of you at uni, but when I was at uni, every week you got a bank or accountancy coming in and basically saying, we want to come to our grad scheme. So actually I did a load of interviews going and working for a bank. And so I was lined up to go and work for a bank. And as soon as I got an offer from this bank, which was actually for a third, I pretty much switched off, and I was kind of like, I'm just going to work on my own projects. But that was kind of where it was towards the end of my degree. And in my third year, I basically was studying with some friends, but not really studying. And noticed that when people were studying in the library, that they were always checking each other out. And so all the guys were like, where are the hot girls working, and vice versa. And so I built a website and overnight to kind of share that experience. And I called it Fit Finder, so it was like finding where the fit people were, and put it live at 9 o'clock in the morning after working on it the whole night. And in the first day, it got about 20,000 people on it. And then within 4 weeks, we had 250,000 people on it. But all the way through that, I mean, it spread to 50 universities in the UK. And I was getting people sending me the floor plans of their libraries to basically put on the website so they could make it more fun. And yeah, it was one of these like crazy things where people just got it, and it was like really engaging, and people just shared it. And so, but it did also get me in a lot of trouble because all the way through that process, my university found out that it was me. I didn't publicize it was me to begin with, but they found out. And they were like, take it down. We've got to take it down.
What was their main objection? I mean, did they had any complaints from anyone? Or?
No, I mean, it was quite funny. Like, I think there was an angle where some people thought it was offensive to women, but then when we looked at the stats, we had more women using it than guys.
I was going to say, presumably anyone could use it.
Yeah, it was kind of like Gossip Girl. Apparently, I don't watch that, but and so and it was that, and I think they also thought that I built it in like university computers, which I didn't. I built it at home, and so they had like kind of a whole thing like that. But technically, it was bringing the university into disrepute. I'm not quite sure how I did that, but in the end, they essentially said, take it down or we'll take your degree away from you. Crazy. So I pushed it to the limit, but then I shut it down, and they fined me anyway to finish my degree.
I mean, that must kind of still annoy you to some extent, because it's one of those things, isn't it? Because same thing happened to Mark Zuckerberg. He was
I think there's
to build something.
Massive culture thing. I think it's changed as well. I reckon if that happened now, so was it 5 years later, then I think they react totally differently.
It's interesting. Yeah. It would be interesting to see if that happens. I mean, I think there's something about the spirit of people that do things like that if you would have switched on, you would think that guy's going places.
I also think that universities and other like, institutions, schools, they're growing up a lot more and understanding like that. Well, actually, they're sort of becoming like they're understanding technology a lot more, and so they're wanting to engage that, they're wanting to see that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. So
have they ever asked you back to speak?
Yeah, and I've actually given I've given lectures there as well. So
that must be quite fun.
It is quite fun. It's amazing how many people still fall asleep in lectures though. But it's quite good because whenever somebody does fall asleep in a lecture, I just go up and take the piss out of them. So
bang on the good.
Yeah.
What do you think about people going to university? Is it essential?
I think this has changed a lot in the last few years as well. Like when I went to university, the fees were much cheaper. I mean, although still coming to London, it was quite expensive, and I fortunately was able to find a way to fund myself through uni with all the website work I was doing and the businesses that we had. But I would seriously consider it now, like whether it was worth spending. I think it's 10 grand a year or something like that. to go to uni. I think, would you rather come out of uni in 40k worth of debt, or put 40k into your own business or whatever? I know a lot of people
get an internship with you,
get an internship and learn on the job. And I think, to be fair, there's a lot of skills that university will teach you. Was my degree worth that? I'm undecided. I think that probably if I was going to uni right now, I probably wouldn't go, and I'd probably try and go and work for a startup, to be honest.
Yeah, I suppose it depends ultimately. If you want to work for somebody, then it's good because that's how you get attention.
And it depends what skills you have as well. Like some jobs do not require you to have a degree, and I think that if you can get on the ladder at a startup and work your way up. Like personally, when I have somebody come to me and I look at their CV, I will look at their work experience before I look at their grades and their degree.
Yeah.
And even like I'm looking to hire a web developer at the moment, and actually one of the things I wrote down is doesn't need a degree. Like, all I need to see is that is he entrepreneurial? Is his work good?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean most people who do web stuff have taught themselves. And, you've been there. You ultimately didn't get chunked out for FitFinder. You don't regret any of that at all? I mean, do you think that it was a valuable thing, or could you have done without the stress ultimately?
It was quite stressful at the time. I remember I was doing towards the end actually. I had 8 exams, and I know I given up on them a little bit because I do this thing called work. At uni, I did this thing called Work Smart, which is basically do the minimum. This is totally the opposite of what you probably have done. Do the minimum of what you need to basically get a certain thing. It's like there was no point me getting a high 2-1, I thought, because as long as I got like a low 2-1 or whatever my grade was, that was the same. Like I'd much rather just do the minimum and then do the stuff I enjoyed on the side and like that I thought was progressing myself. And so for I think 3 or 4 of my exams in my final year, I did the minimum. I just did an all-nighter the night before, and I crammed it in my short-term memory. And because to be honest, if I forgot it the day after, I didn't care. That was fine. Like I just needed it to get that piece of paper.
It's one of those things about university that makes you realise that sometimes it isn't the right thing.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing is like, did I genuinely feel that I was gonna need that in the future? And a lot of that stuff I didn't, and I some of it I haven't used today.
So presumably, as a result of having trouble, what happened to your banking internship? I mean,
actually, I did actually go and work at the bank for 6 months, and I've got a lot of good friends who work there, and I worked on the trading floor at a bank. And one of the things that's quite interesting there is, and did frustrate me quite a lot is, and this is the big difference between going and working for a big corporate and a startup, is that you have so little impact at a corporate. Like the bank I worked at had several thousand people in New York, Tokyo, London, and I worked in a London office where on our floor, on the trading floor, we had probably 500-600 people. Wow. So you're a very, very small cog in a very big wheel, and I found it very frustrating how I used to make suggestions on like how to improve like software, and my job wasn't actually in software. I was actually a trader, but I could see stuff could be improved, and you try and get it done, and they'd say, oh well, we could do this in 2 years' time, and it was so frustrating, especially just kind of like you could probably do that in a few weeks. Or even if you really wanted to hack it out, just a weekend. And so after 6 months, I was actually talking to a couple of investors who had taken interest in what I was doing, and I decided to hand in my notice about 6 months after. So I handed my notice on the 24th of December, and I started the company on the 1st of January, so I had a week off.
And so this is the company that you're still running
so
now,
Floxx,
Floxx. So that's been going that whole time.
So it's been going almost 5 years now. So.
And I mean, what did you find was the most? I mean, did you find it scary? I mean, I suppose you're young. It's not so scary when you're young, branching out on your own. But
well, I think being young is the best thing you have going for you, because you don't have kids, probably not. You're usually not married, and I think that it's you're especially, and this is one of the plus sides to uni in some respects, is that there is little pressure on you, and the fact is you can do a lot of stuff, and you can fail at uni in terms of you can fail businesses, and no one's like looking at you, looking down on you. And the problem is when you're perhaps when you've left uni and you're trying to start up a company and it fails, people are like, oh, he's a failure. And I think this is something in this culture that we don't have right. It's like we should actually be embracing failure, because at the end of the day, very few people get it right first time. Like I rarely do. And the fact is, like, you have to fail to understand what went wrong, and then just learn and learn and learn, and then one day you'll get success. And probably 4 out of 5 things that we do as a company will fail, one of those things will work. You just got to make sure that one thing that works, you learn from it, and you make it as big a success as you can.
That's a big difference between the UK and the US, isn't it?
Yeah,
they're almost too far the other way. They're happy to fail at any cost, and that can be as disruptive.
Yeah, I think
it needs to be a middle ground.
If you go to San Francisco and things like that, they've got a very strong culture, failing fast and just working really hard just to understand what will make something work.
There's an interesting question about that as well, because I mean, a lot of companies are set up really with an exit plan.
Yeah.
Is that something you've done, or is your company something you're running for your life?
I think that's, personally, I think it depends on who you speak to, but I very rarely will write a business plan out before anything. Like, I'm one of these people that if I've got an idea or if I just want to see if it works, I'll try and hack a website together or do a wireframe or a prototype just to understand, just to see if if that's going to be something that is viable, rather than think about anything to do with like revenue or whatever. Yeah. I mean, FitFinder was, I actually ended up selling adverts on that, which paid for the cost of running the website, but it was purely some fun that went out of control. Whereas, and there are plenty of things like that. I mean, Facebook is a great example where, Mark Zuckerberg didn't intend for it to be as big as it is. I mean, he probably thought it could be once it got going, but to begin with, it was just a place to connect his classmates.
I mean, there's a lot of parallels, really. I mean, they were largely the same idea, I suppose.
Oh, the original idea, like he had Face Match, which was very similar to what FitFinder is, and I think there are a couple of others that have been like that. But with tech, there's always going to be things that are improved and new ideas that come about, and it's just a matter of time.
Yeah. Talking about the business now, I mean, obviously relevant for people who want to get into it. What are your feelings? I mean, how many people do you employ, and do you think it's something? Do you think that people? It's because it's quite a scary thing to take on staff, isn't it? I mean, that's one of the hardest things about being a businessman. Yeah. So how have you found that, and what do you find challenging about having people under you?
So we've changed our model quite a lot. So a few years ago, we had about 20 people up in full time up in an office in Angel. And the way that the creative industry and technology industry work is actually a lot of people like to work freelance, and a lot of the guys, especially the projects we work on, it's very much a project comes along and we need a big team. But the problem is we can't sustain having a big team all the time. We'd run out of money because we'd have to end up paying people. So we actually have quite a small core team, about half a dozen developers and designers and project managers that work on the projects. And then if we've got a big project, for example, we work with some of the big banks in the world, then we will just scale up for that. So when we were working on a project earlier this year, I think we had 25 people. But we can shrink to being about 6 people. So in this day and age, you have to be flexible. And that's one of the big pieces of advice is don't hire too quickly, because you'll just if you get costs associated to business, you want to be able to sort of limit the amount of you're spending every month. Unless the fact is you've got guaranteed revenue coming in each month that you're going to be able to pay these people with.
Well, that's a really good question to branch off on about funding. You've had some help with funding, haven't you? You raised some money. But I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you think you could have done it on your own? Could you have got a loan from a bank rather than seeking investors?
I think it's hard. I think when you go to a bank and you have nothing, and even when you go to investors and you have nothing, it's really, really hard to persuade people to give you money.
Especially in this day and age.
Yeah, especially in this day and age. I mean, have any of you guys heard of Airbnb, the website? So Airbnb is a great story about how, when they started out, they found it very difficult to fundraise. And so this is about the time of the last US elections, when it was Obama and McCain. And they couldn't raise money, so what they ended up doing is repackaging cereal. So they designed some cereal boxes, and they went and bought some cereal from Walmart. They put it in the boxes, and the boxes were branded up as the political heroes, so Obama's and Captain McCain's. And they ended up selling them, and they actually raised about $55,000 from just flogging these boxes. And they were on eBay, and people were buying them for $100 a box when they bought them for $2. So they hustled really, really hard. So at the end of the day, I think that you have to think outside the box when it comes to fundraising. I think you can do a lot of clever things. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to somebody and beg for money.
And how did it work for you? I mean, you're working with a former dragon, aren't you? And
we used to actually, but not anymore. But that actually came about because after FitFinder. Doug Richard actually, who was one of the Dragons on Dragon's Den, dropped me an email and basically said, I saw FitFinder, would love to chat, and we got talking. He actually eventually invested £100,000 along with another investor, and we got to the stage that we actually bought them out of the business when we were growing it to as an agency. So he's actually no longer part of the business, but we raised money from him, and then the following couple of weeks we actually raised money. It was quite funny. I went into a Vietnamese cafe in South London, just going to meet these two guys that had been introduced to me, and came out and they offered to, like, in that very meeting, just met them, they offered to invest 200 grand.
Wow.
So I almost classed that was, I found that more like impressive, because I was kind of like, I went in there not trying to raise any money, and then they basically were like, we want to invest.
So you basically walked away with nearly half.
Yeah, but that was lucky. I think that was kind of like, that was, and those two guys are still part of the business, and they're very, very good mentors as well. So one thing I would say about raising money is that don't just take money for the sake of taking money. I think you've got to think very importantly about who you take money from. I think you can find people, it's called smart money. If you can find people that will actually benefit your business as well, then that's exactly what you need to do.
How was Doug as a fit for the business? I mean,
Doug was good. I mean, he's very busy, so he's got lots of other things on the go. So with introductions and things like that, he was good. With some of the more operational stuff, not so good. But that's the thing I actually learned from that, is that don't expect one person just to be the answer for everything. You've got to be varied. Like, we actually had this other great investor called Kevin Wall, who's he's a US investor. He was actually one of the very first investors in a website called Facebook. So that's
so he's got some money to spend.
Yeah. So he's a really good guy, but he's involved in the events industry. So whenever I need to talk about promotion and things like that,
is he still on board?
Yes, he is.
That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, because I suppose you don't have to have them as investors to ask them for advice, I guess. And
No.
To help.
And sometimes, at the end of the day, if you've got people invest in your business, then if you ring them up and you say, "Can I go for a walk for you?" or "Can I talk through a problem with you?" they're not going to say no. But you can always have mentors and things like that. And one of the things I wish I'd done earlier on is, just email people out of the blue saying, do you mind if you just mentor me, or like, can I Skype you for 15 minutes? That's it. And I've got this one problem. But one thing I would do is just like have a purpose, like, get past all the rubbish, all the, don't make it chitty chatty, just get to the point. Because I think a lot of guys that are entrepreneurs are busy. They don't want to necessarily have all the fluff around like mentoring, but they just want to get to the point and help people.
Yeah, I mean that's great. If you're the sort of person that's happy to ask people.
Yeah, and it works up a chain. Like at the end of the day, like I know, like I get people emailing me asking if I can help them, and likewise I have my people that I can, my mentors that I can go and ask and have a problem with, that are far more successful than I am, and that have been there and done it.
For now.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch them up.
What tools do you recommend using then? I mean, especially for someone who's just coming into it and thinking, I want to be a businessman, what should they be using to get into contact with those people?
Well, I think it's a couple of different ways, but email is pretty easy to go and get, and like, to be honest, most people will respond via email. I always find getting like LinkedIn messages, it doesn't work as well. I think if you're clever enough to get their email, also a lot of these guys will have PAs. So if you can be chummy with their PA, or at least get in there somehow, that's the best way to do it.
What about a phone call? No one picks up the phone anymore, do they?
Yeah, but I also think phone calls you can often catch them at a bad time if they think you're being a bit pushy. I think it's always, but if you are emailing them, keep it to the point. Like, don't write a big long email. Just be like, this is who I am, this is what I want, can you help me?
I think people think that they need to be, chatty and to get you on side. Just
to the point. And a lot of these guys will appreciate that more. You're probably more likely to get a response. Yeah.
So tell us a bit more. Tell us about what the businesses are that what are the interesting things that you're doing at the moment? What are the businesses that I suppose the ones that you're most excited about that you're running at the moment?
So Floxx is an agency. So actually, it's kind of a development of what I was doing at school, but just bigger, and instead of working with like hairdressers, and although we do still have those as clients in terms of on our retainer, but. We work with people like big banks. We work with the royal family, doing some of their websites and apps. We work with big newspapers and things like that. So it's just that's really exciting when you get to you can see a product being used really massively, and the fact that we did a website for the Times a few years ago, and we put it live. It was a football website, and in the first week we had like 2.5 million people use it, and that was really cool to see like that many people use it. One of the cool things we work with so many different clients. We work with there's a really good dating app at the moment we're working on with a client called Hitch. That's about matchmaking people up, and that's really exciting to see how that goes from startup, getting that on different platforms and pushing that out there. But we've also got another business that does online ordering for restaurants, and that's really interesting. Going into a industry like restaurants and understanding how technology can improve their lives. And what we're essentially trying to do is just help them take orders online, which is something that's been really, really difficult for them recently. And we just give them a very nice package. So we have about 60 restaurants in London that we manage all their technology for them.
So, I mean, what's it like with that? I mean, do you find restaurateurs are really reluctant to go in for that? I mean, I know what sort of restaurants are you dealing with? I mean, because there's quite a lot of, it's easy to get fast food, but it's more difficult to get sort of higher end stuff, isn't it? So is that something that you've been involved in?
The segment we're kind of looking at the moment are the ones that care quite heavily about their brand. So, people like Pizza Pilgrims, Ping Pong, Rose's Thai Cafe, like lots of places kind of around Shoreditch. They see these really nice places that have got good brands. But also the kind of person that it might be. A lot of our guys, our partners are independents. They've just set up their restaurant. They don't know where to go for online ordering. We just want to make it easy, because they have enough stuff in their lives that is really difficult. And to be honest, in business, if you can just make people's lives a little bit easier, then you can make money out of that. Yeah. And that's kind of the whole point of being an entrepreneur is, with many businesses, is just find a little problem and just try and fix that problem.
Because you're competing in that space with other companies, aren't you? Like Just Eat and things like that.
There's Just Eat, there's Hungry House, there's a lot of people. I mean, somebody could actually go and build their own online ordering platform as well. We just have different models. So Just Eat charge a commission, and they do a lot of marketing for them. We give them the data, and so you have to differentiate yourself somehow. So actually, to be fair, there's actually nothing wrong with copying an idea, in my view. You see it a lot. There's plenty of people that have copied ideas that they see in the US, and you see a lot of ideas in the US, and they just do it over here. You might have seen taxi apps like Halo or Uber and things like that, and how people have just done exactly the same idea but done it in a different city. The idea isn't necessarily the thing that is going to make or break your business. It's going to be the execution. So how well can you actually execute on that idea? How cheaply can you pick up customers? How well can you fix the problem that you're actually trying to solve?
You want to be the best at the thing that you're doing.
Exactly.
Your speciality.
Yeah. And often, it's really hard. You see big, the taxi industry is an example like this, where you've got people like Uber. I don't know if any of you have heard of Uber or used Uber, but how they've actually managed to keep the execution, but also scale to 100 cities very, very quickly. That is impressive. And that's why they're kind of disrupting the taxi industry itself, but also other apps that are kind of already got a head start on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it with Uber. I mean, it's about price, isn't it? They've gone in and you can.
So they've been like, okay, we're going to be competitive on price, but we're also going to have a better user experience. We're going to make sure our drivers are better, or whatever. But you've got to have that kind of edge at something. Like with AutoSwift, the restaurant online ordering business we don't really compete on price. We know we're more expensive than a lot of other people. And the same with the agency is we know that we're not going to be able to compete with lots of other freelancers. We are going to be more expensive, but we know we can do a better job, and we can make it easier for that one customer.
Yeah, I think that's key. So, I mean, for people who want to go and be entrepreneurs or just want to work for an interesting company, what do you think? What do you think they need to do going in? I mean, what's the number one piece of advice for anyone, with no matter what their qualifications that you could give them? How can they be successful? What are you looking for?
I think the best thing to do, if you've never even thought about starting a business or anything like that, the best thing I would recommend doing is just going out there and just trying something out. Even if you've got an idea for something, it might just be I'm going to invent an ice cream, or I'm going to try and set up. Well, here's an idea that I had that I set up in a couple of weeks, ages ago. Was I ran out of socks. I went to my drawer one day and I ran out of socks, and I thought, I've got to go to the shop and buy socks. And I always forgot to do that. So I actually very quickly built a website that people could subscribe to, and they get socks sent to them.
Nice.
just very, very simple, and put it live and just tested it. And we've got, it's not the world's biggest business, but it solves my problem that I now have socks delivered, and now several hundred other people have socks delivered as well. But
you've set up a business to solve your own.
Yeah, it was.
problem.
And to be honest, I haven't really focused on it, but it's to solve a problem. So if you've got a problem, like try and fix it yourself first. And there are plenty other examples that you can go down. But I would recommend doing that. Like you can actually set up a business very cheaply. Nowadays.
It costs like 50 quid if that.
Well, you can get a domain name, you can get a website set up, and I think that's the main thing. Just put that live and just see if it gets any interest.
Yeah. What about? I mean, one of the things that would put me off is probably going to be: do I have an idea good enough?
Yeah.
And if I do, how do I make it into a good thing? I mean, what's the tip there? I mean, how do I? Is it just coming down to testing?
No, I think it's different things. Like if you've got an idea and you're like, actually, this could work, but how do I know whether this works? And you could do the whole thing with market research. One of the things I would recommend is that, say you had an idea for a product, whatever it is, and a good story is actually I went to Tel Aviv a few years ago, and a friend of mine was coming up with this idea for a company, and she was like, do you know what? It's really annoying. Like you can rent hotels, you can rent cars. Why can't you rent like a dog for a weekend? And so that weekend, she kind of came up with the idea for what's called Borrow My Doggy. Now, and if you've not heard of it, it's basically a website like Airbnb, but where you can, if some people are going away for the weekend, you can rent their dog, and you can basically house sit their dog, but you also get to, have a pet for the weekend, and then you give it back. And it's doing really, really well. But so what she did was really interesting. Was she had this idea, but she didn't know whether it would work. So when we got back from the trip, she set up the landing page. And just put a basic idea for this site, like description of what it was is like, rent a dog for a weekend when its owner's away and look after it, and just basically put a simple sign-up form saying put your email address in here if you'd like to do this. And then what you can basically do is just wait until, if you've got 100 email addresses, that's 100 potential customers. That's like something that could be interesting, but you need to get those people on the website first. So go around telling people about it, do some advertising. You can get AdWords set up, or Google AdWords, or go on Facebook and do some basic advertising.
Do you think people worry about keeping their big idea a secret? I mean, does that matter? If people find out what you're up to, do you think that could be detrimental? I think it's
a big problem. A lot of people do like to hoard their idea, and I think it's very, very unlikely, and I've never met anyone that has had such a good idea that that it's worth keeping. A lot of the time it is so much better just talking to people about it, because you learn, people will ask you questions about it and say, pick holes in it, because a lot of the time, if I've had an idea over the weekend, I'll talk to my girlfriend about it, and then I'll come to the office and I'll talk to the guys at the office about it. And normally by the end of that, they've ripped it apart, and it's kind of like, I'm like, well, actually I didn't really think about that. And you need to have that. And I think one of the big problems is if you're so protective over it, and I think obviously there is that danger that you're worried somebody else is going to copy on it. Don't focus on that. Focus on how you are going to be better. I think it's probably more useful spending time going around looking at other people's ideas and going, can I copy this? And what's wrong with that? Can I copy it and do it better? And you look at airlines. Being an airline is not a new thing. I mean, I'm not going to suggest any of you go and set up an airline, because you probably need
big capital expenditure.
Yeah, a lot of money to go and do that. But you see new airlines coming in, like Virgin America, is a big airline. Obviously, it's got the Virgin brand behind it. But they came in and disrupted the US domestic air market by just being better.
Anyone who's ever flown US carriers will know.
Offering Wi-Fi on board, having cool purple lights, and making the booking experience really nice. You can come in and disrupt. EasyJet did it with disrupting British Airways and things like that. Ryanair have done it and been even cheaper, but they sacrificed customer service. But
still a big business.
But yeah, they've turned it into business. They've found their little segment there. Yeah.
Regionally speaking, you're from London. Your business is based here. Is that important, or do you think that you can go anywhere?
I think it's interesting. I've got a friend who's a guy called Fraser Doherty, who is a jam entrepreneur. His gran actually gave him a recipe.
I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, if you ever go into a supermarket, look out for a brand called Super Jam. And he's I'm giving lots of plugs to him.
That's good. That's what you should do.
But he's got a great story, because his gran gave him this jam recipe. He ended up making this. He started when he was kind of 15 as well, and he now just sells jam all around the world. But he went on he's actually, he actually is just him. The company is just him because he invents the recipes, so the ingredients and everything like that, and then he's got another company he outsources all the manufacturing to. So he literally goes around to these supermarkets around the world and takes orders, sends it to his manufacturer. His manufacturer bottles it up, does everything, and then ships it out. That's it. So he actually packed up he got rid of his flat, put everything in a suitcase, and went round and was going to I'm going to work from a different city every few days for the next year.
Wow.
And so he did that. So you can run it. That's probably the great thing about if you're a freelancer or if you're running your own business, is that you can have that element of flexibility. The problem you do have is that you are working all the time. It's the fact that I've been on holiday, but there hasn't been a single day where I've not worked. Yeah. And your friends and family have to be very tolerant of you in terms of being on the phone, being on your laptop. My girlfriend texts me now just saying, do you want to go out for dinner? And I'm like, I can, but I'm probably going to be on my phone for half the night. So you do have to have compromise and, you have to try and figure out how you get that work-life balance.
Yeah, I suppose you have to fill your life with people who are going to understand. If you're going to be a success, you can't be.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's pretty much enough from me asking this. Does anyone else have anything they want to ask? Learn from the master. That's my advice. Grab this one in.
Thanks. Back to that point when you were at university and you came up with the idea of that website, basically. When you're at that point where you just have the idea and maybe you took that night and you programmed it and then you set it live. So it's basically at point zero, but how do you actually get the traction? How do you get the audience to, once you have a critical mass of people out there?
So this is one of the big challenges that anyone will face, and we still face this every single day. I mean, if you haven't heard of growth hacking, I'd all write this down. Growth hacking is something you should just Google and have a look at what it is. With FitFinder, it was probably just luck, I think, which isn't much help to you all. But I mean, it was one of those things that it was inherently viral. I think the fact that it had a funny name, it was quite a controversial topic. It was within universities, which, building technology in these kind of on a campus kind of thing, people do share that kind of stuff. And so it was quite interesting that it went from 25,000 to 50,000 to 100,000. It kind of doubled very, very quickly. And I think that there's all sorts of books that you can read about gamification and the psychology behind certain products. I'll put a few on my website, but there's a few books that I really recommend. The Mating Mind is one of them, which is a really good book about psychology and marketing. But the first thing is just to qualify your product. So get your landing page up, describe it, and then just getting enough people to look at it. And one of the things that's really important, if any of you have ever looked at what's called a conversion rate, so that's how many people go on your website versus sign up. That's a really important indicator of if it's a good idea. If you get 100 people going on your website, but only one person signs up, that's probably not so good. But if you get 5 people going on your website and one person signs up, that's 20% conversion rate. I would argue you probably need more than 5 people going on a website to prove the test, but you see where I'm going.
Well, I mean, speaking about, because social media is a really key part of businesses. Yeah. Have you learned any interesting lessons about doing well on social media? I think
social media is great in terms of it's very cheap marketing. However, it's not actually like the days where you look at things like, I don't know if any of you remember Farmville and things like that, where you can actually kind of hack social media to make it, your product become very valuable. And I think it's really interesting that anyone can set up a Facebook page. It's about getting the engagement with the audience, and building that audience is the challenging thing. But one thing I really like about, I think it's really important from the off, is to write down kind of what kind of company do you want to run. If you've got to that stage where your product is now becoming a bit more serious and whatever, is then building that brand around what you're doing. What do you want to be known for? With the restaurant business, we want to be known about being the experts, the guys to go to for your online ordering. For the agency, we want to be the guys to go to when you get your app built. And so, you've got to position yourself, and social media can do that really well.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Do you think it's important to have a good credit score rating when you're starting off in a business?
Deep question. Depends on where you're going for your money. I think it's...
Because I have one with an Equifax account, but then another bit of money in ISA Savers account.
Yeah. I think it is... I don't think it's the end of the world, to be honest. I mean, when I was raising money from the angels, they didn't do any background. I don't think they did any background checking or anything like that. I mean, it depends who it is. I mean, I think with things like I don't know if you've heard of crowdfunding. Like crowdfunding nowadays, where you can actually go on a website like Crowdcube or Seedrs, and you actually put your idea. You make a video, you put your idea up there. It's kind of like Kickstarter as well, and you basically anybody can invest. So I can invest. I actually invested in a peanut butter company the other day. Put a couple of £100 in it just because I like the brand, I like the idea of it. And
it's like short-term investment.
Well, that one's probably not going to be that short-term, probably, but it's kind of like micro investment. It's kind of like I can invest a small. Instead of getting, if you're raising £100,000, instead of getting one person to put in £100,000, can we get 1,000 people to put in £100? You see what I mean? It's kind of that, it's turning it that way around, and that's becoming quite interesting at the moment. The good credit score thing, I don't know whether a lot of these places do check that in terms of the due diligence. I think it's, to run a company, eventually you have to be fairly good at managing. So if you can manage your life, then that's kind of number one thing. So, get into the habit of, writing tasks down, like your goals. I'm a bit geeky when it comes to this, but like I track certain things in my life that that make sure that I keep on top of things. So I track when I've gone to the gym, if I've been up before 5 o'clock in the morning.
How much money you spend each day?
Yeah, exactly. I do financial analysis of my own stuff.
Say live low cost, eat low cost.
Yeah, just being in control of that, because when you're running a company, you kind of need to have that kind of discipline. It's all about discipline, I think.
One more, and then we'll do the exercise things.
So you mentioned that it's a good idea to work for a startup before starting your own business. So I just want to ask you in a bit details. What are you looking from someone who wants to join your startup, especially if he's not a developer?
I think that it's really important that any kind of startup company that has that kind of culture, that we're in. If you've ever been to Shoreditch or around here before, then this is the best place to find startup. I mean, they call this Silicon Roundabout, the old street roundabout. And so there are so many small companies here that are looking to hire people. Personally, I like to see people that are like myself, like entrepreneurial, that can that have very, very motivated, that shown that they can actually they can put their mind to a task and they can actually achieve something, so they don't necessarily need to be handheld through a task. I think if you're looking to put stuff on a CV, and to be honest, actually your cover letter is in many ways more important than a CV, because you can explain the kind of things you've worked on in a bit more of a more informal way. And so if you haven't already done it, go out, try and take £50 out of the bank, or even less than that. Try and find a business that you can do. You could even do the sock thing, right? Where you could set up a website for £20, and actually quite a lot of good ideas start like this, where you don't even have the money to spend on a certain product. So if I was doing the sock business again, I actually bought 1,000 pairs of socks to start with, which I've still got some of them. So if anyone wants socks, it's fine. But what you could do is set up the whole website, but not buy any of the stock. And then as soon as somebody comes along and buys something, you quickly go along to Marks and Spencer's or whatever and buy some socks and post them onto them. It's not always about the money. At the end of the day, when I worked in the bank, you don't want to be clock watching his job. No one wants to be doing that. You want to be really passionate about your job, feel like you're actually building something. And that's one of the exciting things about technology and working in startups.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well we'll spend a bit of time. We're just gonna get you to split up into groups of roughly 6, I think. Is that right? We're
going to do some wireframing. So if you've ever done this before, if you've got an idea, I'm not going to steal them, but I might invest in them. What we're going to try and do is just do some live wireframing. So there's some pens, there's some notepads. Split into a group of 3. Chat about, come up with an idea between you, and then just do the basic, either a website or an app. Just draw it out and draw the basic functionality. One thing I would say is just keep it super simple. Come up, if you've got a problem, perhaps it could even be a problem that you just don't know how to fix, but it could the app. This is what the app could look like. And then I'll come around and if you want to pitch me the idea or just chat about what I would do in that kind of situation, then I'm going to be there to help. In the meantime, I will have a cup of tea.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. what I'm learning is that there is a universal need for people to find other people. That's basically what it boils down to.
A lot of the ideas came around that, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously everyone's just basically lonely, especially in this city. So give each other a hug before you leave. Give us one final tip before we finish, just to, you know, something maybe you've seen tonight, or just, you know, an inspirational thing.
I think you know, what's really cool here is you can see a lot of people have got great ideas, and I think now it's just about figuring out, getting from that idea stage. I think this is the bit that everybody has that trouble with, and you know, that's what makes people stand out, is getting from that idea stage into like executing on it. You know, many of you will fail if you go out and do stuff, but you just got to try and try again until you succeed.
No shame in it, and a lot of these ideas could be pursued.
Exactly, and you know, you're never going to know whether it works unless you give it a shot, really.
Absolutely. Cool. Thanks very much. They'll be talking to you a bit about your experience tonight, so be honest. And thanks again.
Cheers.
Cool.
Very good. Thank you. Cheers.
Very good.